Hello, my name is Tony Michael Warren. I'm a hypnotherapist, and I'd like to speak to you today about how your brain works, how pain works, and why hypnosis is such a wonderful tool for bringing pain. So let's start by discussing a little bit about how your brain is put together and how it works. Now I want to use a very simple illustration for you today. I know that there are a lot of fancy scientific models, the plastic models, you've seen them, of the brain. Now the problem with those is that sometimes people have a hard time remembering or relating to those, kind of putting it in order. So I've chosen to use a very simple illustration. This is a golf club. It's a driver, and you notice that it's got the skinny handle, the stem, and then the swollen part on the top. This represents your spinal cord that goes down your back. The little swelling at the top is the medulla oblongata. You've heard of that before, haven't you? That controls your balance. Now, all the other autonomic functions, the automatic functions like breathing, your heart beating, the regulation of temperature, are all controlled in this, which we would call the reptilian brain, the inner brain. We call it a reptilian brain because that's as much brain as reptiles have. Snakes and lizards, they have this part of the brain, but that's it. And it gets them by just fine. Now, as humans, or as mammals, we have another layer of our brain, and it is wrapped around this inner brain. It's called the midbrain, or more correctly, more scientifically, it's called the cingulate cortex. Now, you recognize that name cortex, don't you? Because you've probably heard of the cerebral cortex, the part that's on the outside, that wrinkly part of your brain where you do all your cognitive thinking. Well, this is similar, but it's inside. It's the middle part of your brain wrapped around the reptilian part. It's also kind of wrinkly because it does process. You do some thinking there. Now, what's interesting about this part of the brain is that this part does not think in words. It thinks in emotions, feelings, images. This is the part of the brain that is really in charge because it motivates us, it controls our desires, and it holds our programming and our memories from childhood, and these are very powerful. Now, on the outside of the brain, the final layer, this is the layer that makes us human. And monkeys don't have this, not very much of it anyway, and reptiles don't have any of it. That wrinkly outside part of the brain, the cerebral cortex, on the outside, that is where all of our upper level thinking happens. And this is what really kind of gets us into trouble because we believe, as humans, we like to believe, that we are consciously making decisions, that we're taking in knowledge, input, and we're reasoning on it with our cerebral cortex, which is what makes us so smart, and we're making decisions. But that's not really true. What this part of the brain really does is justify whatever the inside part decides to do. So, when you see a really nice red car, a fancy little sports car, and you decide to buy it, you don't decide to buy it with this part of your brain, with the thinking part. You decide to buy it with this part, or maybe even the very inner part of your brain, because it thinks it's sexy, and your sex drive comes from the inside. Now, what does all this have to do with pain? Well, here we go. And with hypnosis. The signals from your body, the sensations that are sent to your brain by the pain receptors, they're nothing but a sensation. They're not pain. You don't feel pain in your body. It is interpreted, those signals are interpreted by this part, by the cingulate cortex. This is what tells you if you're in pain. So, say you stub your toe. It sends a signal. The sensor sends a signal up through the brainstem, and it winds up right up here in the anterior cingulate cortex. Now this part of the brain, it goes through the thalamus on the way, but that's where it winds up, is right here. This part of the brain decides how to interpret that signal. It attaches emotion to it. That's why sometimes when you're in pain, you cry. Now think about that. You cry, that we associate that with sadness. It's an emotion. But that emotion was attached to the pain signal by this part of your brain, the anterior cingulate cortex, right up here. So, we know that the signal comes up, it's interpreted here. Now what's wonderful about hypnosis is that when you're hypnotized or working with a therapist, you are working with this part of your brain. You're communicating directly with the part of your brain, the cingulate cortex and even the inner brain, the brain stem, where pain is processed, where your emotions occur, where your feelings happen. And this part of the brain can be re-educated on how to interpret that signal. It can be totally eliminated so that through hypnosis the signal never really even gets here. It doesn't really affect it at all. Or it can just be reinterpreted so that rather than feeling what we would call pain, you feel something like a tingling sensation or coolness or numbness. And that's very simple to do through hypnosis. Now, I have to give you a word of caution here about pain. Pain is useful. Pain is important. It tells us when our body has been damaged, and we need it. So you should never use hypnosis or chemicals, drugs, or any other method for interrupting pain or eliminating pain without first seeing a medical doctor to find out why the pain is there. So first consult a doctor. But here's what happens sometimes. We've hurt ourselves, the pain has come, it's told us, hey, you're hurt, and it's served its usefulness. We know there's something wrong there. Now, the body could have healed already, and the sensors, the receptors, are still firing. And they're still giving us a pain signal, even though there's no reason for it. There's no damage anymore. So that's an instance when we want to do away with that pain. Another situation is chronic pain, like arthritis, or maybe the pain from chemotherapy, from AIDS. Something that's painful, and it continues to be painful, but the signal is not really beneficial to us anymore. We know that the damage is there, but we don't need to keep feeling it all the time. Well, that is where hypnosis is a wonderful thing, because through hypnosis we can communicate with this central and the inner part of your brain, and we can help it to reinterpret that signal so that you do not have to continue being in discomfort. And what a wonderful and powerful thing that is, that you can use your own mind, this creative and imaginative part of your mind, where feelings, emotions, and images are formed. And that is the way we communicate with it. This part of the brain understands that, and without your even thinking about it, without getting that outer layer involved, the pain can be eliminated.